I was young, maybe somewhere between 12 and 14 years old at the time this happened. I had several friends who lived in the neighborhood behind mine, and I was a latchkey kid, so I would often walk there by myself and walk home by myself as well. The walk was maybe 10 minutes or so. One day I was walking to a particular friend's house to spend the night, so I had my backpack on me. I had made it just past the clearing of the small wooded path I take from my neighborhood to hers when I noticed this large white van. The kind those stranger danger commercials typically warn you about. When I walked by, I noticed two men were driving, and something about their faces made the hairs on the back of my neck stand straight up. I continued on walking, trying to glance every now and then again to see if the van had started moving. Much to my dismay, it did. It was very slow. This was a residential area after all. Immediately though, I started running. I turned a corner quick, and luckily made it to my friend's house, losing them at the last minute. I was huffing and puffing, as a child with asthma, and so my friend's dad asked what happened. He goes outside, only to see the van is now obviously gone. He tells me I watched too many horror movies, and I was probably just overreacting. Well, a couple days later, I yet again was going to sleep at this friend's house, so I had my backpack once again. This was early in the 2000s, so I didn't quite have a cell phone yet. I clear the same path when I quickly noticed the same van with the same men in it. They immediately lock eyes with me. I realized pretty quickly that I was now in danger if they had ill intent. They'd seen me, they know which street I'm walking to, and they're close enough to me that if I turn around, I'm confident they could still catch me on foot. I book it. I've never run my little asthmatic ass so fast before in my life. To my horror though, the van accelerates and follows me up until I reach the street. At this point, the man in the passenger seat flung the door open and got out chasing me on foot. He was overweight luckily, so I knew my best chance was to outrun him. I threw my backpack, hoping it would either hit him or trip him. Luckily, I did cause him to stumble over just long enough to stall him a bit. I made it to my friend's house, and her dad called the police. They retrieved my backpack, but the men were long gone, and unfortunately I didn't catch the license plate in all the chaos. I didn't see them or hear anything about it again until a few weeks later when we received a letter in the mail from the town police department alerting my parents that one of the registered sex offenders who had moved in years ago was arrested again for attempting to kidnap another child on the same street. Turns out he was the one driving. The second guy was a new accomplice he'd found. They attached a photo of both men with the letter, and even their eyes on the paper made my blood run cold. Very long. I apologize, but I kinda don't know how to be concise. Halloween night, stereotypical, I know. Several years ago, I was followed home by a stranger. I worked at a large mall about an hour away from home. The stores all closed at 10 p.m., and the only bus home ran every hour and only dropped me off 2/3 of the way home. I would have to walk the entire rest of the way. This usually happened between 11 and 1 a.m. at night, depending on if I could get the store closed down on time and if the bus wasn't too packed for me to get on. I'm not a small woman. I'm fairly tall and fairly round, not particularly attractive. My uniform was just a polo shirt and black trousers, flat shoes, all covered in a thick coat. I didn't see him get on the bus. To be fair, the bus was packed and noisy, and the walkways were crowded. I did my best to just block it out with my headphones and start staring out the window. I'm not a people person, and having been at work for 12 hours on a busy day, surrounded by these same assholes, I was just pissed off and desperate to get off the bus and be home. When we finally got to my stop, I managed to struggle my way to the front of the bus, through people that refused to move. I stumbled out into the night air and breathed a huge sigh of relief. A couple of people got off the bus behind me, and I started up the hill, crossing the road to continue up the side street that led to my road. This side street is very long and has offshoots into residential streets on very steep hills going downward. The street itself is lined with various small shops, and there's a high grassy bank on the opposite side that has houses all along the top. It all feels very isolated after the shops close. Very few people ever get off at my bus stop this time of night, and even fewer still head in the same direction. Those that do cut off and go down one of these hills long before I get to the hill that leads up to my building. Now, the street isn't very well lit. The street lamps are few and far between. Several of them are only motion activated, so they don't even turn on until you're right underneath them. I've walked home in the dark this way nearly 1,000 times, and I've walked to work this way at 3 or 4 in the morning 1,000 times too, for a different job albeit. Whilst I always enjoy the cool night air, am not afraid of the dark, and love how bright the stars are where I live, I don't loiter. I walk fast so I can get home and shower ASAP. This night, though, I noticed someone walking behind me. I usually do when it happens because, like I stated above, very few people walk this way at this time of night. I was aware of him and waiting for him to turn down one of the side streets. He didn't. It felt a little bit weird, but I guess I'm not the only person that lives in the area, so maybe he wasn't just a regularly walking person at this time of night, so I just never seen him before. I get to the medical surgery and car park at the bottom of my hill, and cut across it same as always. At this point, I know if he also heads up my hill, I need to start getting a little bit more worried. This hill goes alongside the surgery, and then there are high walls on my side of the street that block off the flats on the other side from my road. They can only be accessed from the road before mine. At the top of the hill, this wall ends and turns into an alley that runs parallel to my building. The opposite side of the road has multiple closed pubs, a closed corner store, and an old church that's been converted into a Muslim worship center, which is also closed. There are even less street lamps here, and my building is surrounded by a big metal fence with 20 or so feet of grass that slopes down to the entrance where the doorway is lit up. Point being, it's isolated, and the only reason someone should be up there this time of night is if they also lived in the same building as me. This guy crosses the car park after me, and now I'm feeling a bit concerned. I know he doesn't live in my building. There are 9 flats over 3 floors, and 10 people. I know all of them, and they all know me too. We would recognize each other even in this level of darkness. I start to walk faster up the hill, hoping to get inside the building before he can catch up. He starts walking faster too. I can hear him gaining on me, and by the time I get to the gate, I know he's too close for me to be able to open the door and get inside before he's on me. The building is already dark, and I know everyone's in bed. It makes me feel all alone, and at this point I'm shitting myself. Thinking quickly, I cross the road and walk further up the hill behind parked cars. I use the opportunity to swing my backpack off of one shoulder and grab my keys. I wait for him to follow me and get behind the cars too, so it will take just a little longer for him to be able to cross back over before I bolt across the road, throwing open the gate. I swing it hard behind me, because he's now sprinting at me, and I think it will either latch before he can catch it, or it will smack him. Either way, it will buy me just a few seconds. I slide down the slope, barely staying on my feet because it's dangerously slippery when it's wet. I turn the corner at the bottom, and slam my keycard on the reader, pressing hard on the heavy door before it beeps, so it will open that much faster. The door is extremely heavy, and on a fire safety hinge. That means I can't slam it or force it closed. The stairs are a couple of steps into the building and to the left. I live on the top floor. It's not exactly a big building, just 3 flats on each floor and 2 flights of stairs. It's also a completely concrete stairwell, so every little sound echoes and can be heard behind closed doors. I get inside the building and immediately start bolting up the stairs. I'm only a few steps up when the door flies open behind me and the guy comes sprinting after me. Feeling a little bit more secure now that I'm in my building and only a few feet away from my neighbors, I spin around before he reaches me and slam my heavy backpack into him. He falls back to the landing and manages to catch himself by grabbing a hold of the handrail. I scream "what the fuck" at the top of my lungs and hold my bag in front of me. Now we're inside, and the stairwell is lit by the motion-activated lights. I get my first proper look at him. He's a little taller than me being 5'8". He's black, and he's old enough to be graying. His clothes are weird, all made out of that weird waxy material some weatherproof jackets are, and he's wearing these heavy boots. I don't recognize who he is at all. He looks at me with these wide eyes as I stare him down. I'm fully prepared to kick him in the face and throw my bag if I have to. I don't want him to be able to follow me into my flat, so I stare him down. He begins to stutter a bit, hands ringing over the handrail and ducking his head a little, trying to look pathetic and harmless. He mutters something about just being here to visit his son. Like I stated before, 9 other people than me live in this building. At that time, none of them were black, and none of them other than myself were young enough for him to be their parent. Even if his son did live here, how would he know to follow me off the bus to get to my building? Why did he follow me when I moved away from it? And why did he chase me? He could have just walked inside and buzzed to his son to let him in if that was true. I began shouting at him to get out, repeating those 2 words over and over again, sprinkling in some "I don't know you" and "you don't live here's." He continues muttering, making excuses, but I shout over him. When I hear neighbors moving around and coming toward their doors, probably to look through their peepholes, I begin to back up the stairs. My neighbor right at the bottom of the stairs, behind the man, opens her door, leaving her chain on and peering through at us. She asks me if I'm okay, and if she needs to call the police. The guy spins to stare at her, his hands out in a stop motion, and I hear another neighbor open his door behind the stairs, also on the ground floor. He calls out too in concern. I yell out to both of them, "He followed me home. I don't know him. He won't leave me alone." I'm now at the top of the first set of stairs, still looking down upon him. My male neighbor starts yelling at him to get the fuck out. Either more intimidated by the man than he was me, or realizing he was quickly becoming outnumbered, he begins trying to open the front door. You have to press a button to get it to open, and he clearly didn't know this. Further evidence he had never been here before. Feeling more secure now that I'm not alone, and he's trying to flee, I bolt across the landing, up the final flight of stairs, and get my door open before locking it behind me. I was dripping sweat, and very close to a panic attack. I dragged my Hoover to the front door and propped it up, just in case someone tried to open it, so that I would hear it fall. I didn't sleep very well at all, listening to every little sound in the building. Luckily, at least I didn't have work the next day. I woke up at about 6 a.m. to a lot of sound on the building's landings. I could hear people opening every bin chute room and coming back out again. I peered through my peephole to see uniformed policemen searching the common areas of the building. I didn't call the police myself. I assume one of my neighbors downstairs did for me. The bin rooms are fairly large, so I imagine they were checking to see if someone was hiding. I don't know for sure, and I didn't ask. Other than asking me if I was okay when we saw each other next, the neighbors that helped on that night never said anything else about it. I don't know who the guy was or what he wanted. I've never seen him again, and I stopped working at that shopping center a couple of years later. I do feel guilty for not calling the police, just in case he had done this before or since, and the woman didn't manage to get away. But at the time, I just wanted to forget about all of this and move forward. This happened when I was in high school, a very long time ago. My mom just recently found the paperwork about it when she cleaned out her office upon retiring from the police department. I remember being very upset and scared when it happened, but reading the details as an adult, it sounded even worse than I remembered. I was 17 and female, working in a flower and gift shop. It's nighttime and a man comes in. Short, overweight, balding, 40s, very creepy. He tells me about how he needs an apology gift for his girlfriend, so I offer a bouquet, obviously. It's a flower shop after all. He then says she doesn't like flowers because they die. This was the first weird thing, as he came into a flower shop. Then he goes into detail about how he hit her and asks me if I think he was right to do so. This was a long time ago, so I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something along the lines of, "Not if you want her to continue being your girlfriend." He then tells me what a great job I'm doing and asks when I get off work. I dodge answering, and he leaves without a problem soon after. Nothing after that for 6 months. Then right before Valentine's Day, he walks in the door 1 minute before close. It was dark, and from the outside it looked like I was working alone, as my coworker, who was about 40, was in the bathroom. Instinctively, it felt like a predator had just entered the room. You know when something isn't right, and everything about this guy felt not right. I then notice he has a tarnished silver revolver tucked into the front of his windbreaker, which is halfway unzipped. It was obvious he wanted it to be seen. I quickly scribbled a note to my coworker that said, "He has a gun," and handed it to her when she came out of the bathroom. She calmly walked to the phone and looked at me, wordlessly asking if she should call the cops. I shook my head no, as I felt like it might escalate the situation beyond control. God forbid he heard the police coming and took us hostage or something. I was just going to try and act as calm and normal as I could, and hopefully not tip the situation into something more dangerous. The man spends 15 minutes wandering around what was a fairly small shop. In retrospect, he probably was waiting to see if my coworker would leave, as it was now well past closing. Finally, he places an order for pickup on Valentine's Day, which gives me his name and info for the police report I'm sure as hell about to file. He buys a card and pulls out a wad of $100 bills, which he slowly thumbs through, as if looking for the right one for which to pay for his $40 order. I ask him if he wants a bag, as it would be very inconspicuous if he just showed up at home with a Valentine's card. He replies, "No, I don't feel like being inconspicuous tonight," which seemed like an obvious reference to the gun hanging out of his coat. He leaves, and we quickly lock the door and watch him sit in his truck outside. We were not about to exit the shop until he was long gone. Finally, though, he pulls out of his parking spot, only to move to another spot slightly further away and continue to just sit there staring. I don't know how long we waited for him to leave, but eventually he finally did. I called my mom crying. She called the police, who came to the shop the next day to take a report. I told my best friend at the time what happened. She told her mother. Her mother happened to work with the man and informed security at her job. She said he was always very weird, creepy, and liked to talk about weapons a lot. Security at his job, it's a large company with government contracts and things having to do with tech and security, pulled him into the office and questioned him about it. He claimed it was a glove in his pocket, not a revolver. The police were pissed that his company made contact about him with it before they did, and he successfully dodged the cops' multiple calls and visits to his apartment. My mom, much to my teen fury at the time, made me quit my job, which was devastating, as I loved it there. In retrospect, though, it was probably the right call. Dude came in on Valentine's Day and picked up his order, and I never saw him again after. This happened in 2019. I was in my second year of college and living in a townhome about a 10-minute walk from campus. I lived with 2 other girls at the time, but they were all back at their parents' house for the holiday. I work in healthcare and was working Christmas this year. A little bit of a backstory. There used to be 4 of us living there, but one girl had moved out due to issues with her boyfriend. He was a jackass who abused our kindness on allowing him to stay there. Was only supposed to come every so often, but basically ended up living there. We told her she needed to kick him out after an incident with him one night, where he got physical with her and verbally abusive with the rest of us. She wouldn't listen, and we told her we would have to talk to the landlord then. Long story short, she ended up moving out and left on bad terms with us. On another side note here, I have been in physically and mentally abusive relationships before, so I understand how things may have been going for her. I tried my best for 2 years at that point to help her open her eyes to the abuse and get her away from him. Not much else you can do. At this point, it was affecting everyone, and we didn't feel safe with him there, so she moved out. Back to the story. It was Christmas Eve, and I worked the next day, so I was getting ready for bed. I locked the doors, turned the lights off, and went downstairs where my bedroom was. I was scrolling on TikTok for about an hour. It was Christmas Day at this point, when I heard what sounded like the chairs in the kitchen moving. The kitchen was right above my bedroom. I thought maybe I was hearing the neighbors next door, as we share the same walls and sometimes they can be a bit loud. I remembered one of them texting me earlier though, and asking me to bring in a package they were expecting because they were all gone. The noise was fairly short-lived, and so I brushed it off at first. Next thing I know though, my bedroom door is being slowly opened. In this moment, I get a flashback and remember my second grade teacher telling us about the time someone broke into her house, and she acted as if she were asleep, so if they were just there to rob her, they wouldn't feel the need to hurt her if she saw them. Then I realized though that my phone screen was lighting up my square, jaw-dropped face. It wasn't like I could just act like I was asleep. Where I'm lying in bed faces directly to the door anyway, so we were just staring right at each other. There I was laying in my bed, shitting myself, while this guy has one foot in my bedroom with the door cracked open. It felt like an eternity, but in reality it was probably more like 10 seconds of us just staring at each other. He slowly takes his foot out and closes my door behind him. I sat there in complete and utter shock. I couldn't make out what he looked like, as my eyes were still adjusting to the dark from the phone screen. All I could see was a backwards baseball cap. I knew I had to call the police, but my anxious ass knew if I called it would alert my parents' phones that I had done so. Me being dumb as hell, I thought that I didn't want to make them worry. I was also scared he might still be somewhere in the house, and I didn't know what he would do if he heard me making a call to the police. I texted the guy I was seeing at the time and told him some random guy just broke into my house and came into my room. He snapped me out of it thankfully and told me to call the police, so afterwards I did. The dispatcher asked me if I felt comfortable to go unlock the front door for them so they wouldn't have to break it down. I told her no way. I don't care if the door is broken. I'm not going up there alone. A couple of minutes later, I see flashlights shining through my window. I hear the police knocking at the door and announcing themselves. They get in and ask me where I was. I came out of my room and they came and got me. They told me to wait on the back porch while the two of them searched the house, and one of them stayed with me. It was just like the shit you see in movies where they have their guns drawn and turn the corner with their partner and everything. They didn't find anyone, and I told them it didn't look like anything had been taken. They even tried to get fingerprints, but they were unsuccessful in the end. They started asking me questions and informed me that the back door was unlocked and had no signs it had been broken. I told them though that I had locked it before I went to bed. Luckily, the guy I was staying with talked to me that night, but I still couldn't fall asleep. I kept having to check each and every corner of the house over and over. I placed chairs under the door handles on the front door, back door, and even my bedroom. The next day I informed our landlord, and she refused to come out and change the locks. She never ended up changing them for the rest of the time we lived there. Every time I go to bed now, I triple check all the doors have been locked. Doesn't matter where I am. I have a dog now and he helps my anxiety of intruders, as well as recent purchase of a Ring doorbell. I personally believe it was our old roommate's boyfriend. I think he may have had an extra key, because he was already basically living there. I don't understand though why he didn't do anything. To me, to the house, even to our belongings. If it were just someone random, I don't know why they wouldn't have done what they intended, and that could be many different possibilities. I don't know what their intentions were that night, but to the man who broke into my house on Christmas Eve, let's not meet again.